Thomas Kuhn, who was talking about the paradigm shift, I remember that he was saying that it doesn't depend on how much evidence you place in front of a professor, saying that this is real. The non-physical world is there because we can prove it. And you can have tons of evidence. It's not enough. It's a question of reaching this critical mass of people and events, and not only evidence, but a critical mass, or even that some researchers die and the younger ones are different. I don't know.
Welcome to Mind the Shift. My name is Anders Bolling. In our culture, medicine and healthcare are often seen as some kind of branches of natural science, even physics, and Western modern physics at that. For decades, even centuries, mainstream medicine has disregarded ancient methods and the connection between body and mind, which most of us intuitively, I think, feel is a real thing. And that brings us to what is often referred to as alternative or complementary medicine, or alternative and complementary treatments. And my guest today is a returnee, my friend and journalist colleague from Denmark, Jesper Madsen. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Anders.
One of your main fields of knowledge is this thing that I mentioned here, alternative medicine. So that's the topic of today. I mean, I wouldn't say that you're an expert. I think you might not do that also because you're not formally an expert, but you've been delving into this topic a lot as a journalist. You've written a lot about it. You've done some private research on it and studied it for a long time and have many experiences around it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, my connection to this issue is, of course, as a journalist. Some people think something else about it, and I start telling them that I'm not treating their health problems, but I'm treating their communication.
Yeah. So we already, after our previous episode together, which is for those of you who are interested in checking that out, that's episode number 79. Already when we did that, after that episode back in January, we talked about doing a special episode on this topic. So here we are. Let's do it. So complementary and alternative medicine, CAM, as it is often referred to, is what is alternative treatments? Can you start by defining it? Because I mean, what is it alternative to? Alternative to what?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this definition depends on who you ask, because I don't think that two countries will have the same definitions, but at least in Denmark, it is defined as something which is going on outside the public health service and can be carried out by people who are not health professionals. So actually, that's a thing to remember, that it's not based, this definition, on whether it works or not. It's nothing about evidence, but it's about the formal status of what is going on. But as I said, that will be different in other countries for sure.
And it's used by millions, tens of millions of people all around the world, of course. Yeah,
even hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah.
So which treatments, alternative medicines, medical medicines are the most common, and which ones do you know most about? If you just allow me, I can just list a few here. Mm-hmm. I think the audience, the listeners, the viewers will recognize at least a few of them. and there are many more, of course, but it could be things like acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractic, herbal medicine, oriental medicine, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, Tai Chi, Reiki, Qigong, and even art, dance, and music. So which ones of these are you familiar with, and which ones are most common, would you say?
Well, speaking for Denmark, acupuncture and reflexology and different kinds of massage, they are definitely the three most used treatments in my country. And of course, people in Denmark use a lot of other CAM modalities, as we call them, but they don't really count so much when you look at the statistics. But every second Dane will have some experience in his or her lifetime with complementary medicine.
Mm. Would you say that's representative of the rest of the Western world as well?
No, there are so many differences and so many ways of making these statistics. So that would be kind of a scientific article in itself to dive into this. But looking from the global perspective, treatments like homeopathy, for example, is very widespread in the world, even though it comes from Germany in the first place. It was a German doctor who initiated this treatment. In India, for example, it's quite normal. And in a lot of European countries, it's labeled like mumbo jumbo by medical doctors. They think it's crazy. So it's a very blurred picture if you take the global perspective.
So what's the reason behind those differences, do you think? Why is it considered mumbo jumbo in some countries and widely used in other countries? I mean, the countries where it is widely used, does it go well together with the other more ordinary medical system, so to speak, the Western medicine? Do they go well together, like in India, for instance?
Well, as I said, of course, I'm not a medical expert, but the thing is that in India, let's look at India. The traditional medicine, the Ayurveda, for example, is still pretty strong. It's nothing in India. Nobody would think of this as mumbo jumbo. They just go to this doctor, or they go to a doctor who is just like doctors in our countries, the Western medicine, but they don't think of this as a big contradiction, because you'll find the Ayurvedic doctors everywhere in India. Actually, I saw one some years ago when I was on holidays. It was quite interesting. I went to his consultation together with my wife. Anyway, so the countries who are very strong keeping their old traditions, they are, I think, are more open to whatever is labeled complementary medicine, even if it's not originated in their own country. That's why I think. And also the third world, a lot of countries, they simply don't have the economy to handle some very expensive treatments. Even if they might be good, they might be bad. It's not about that, but it's quite a big industry, and you have to be able to put it in your budgets in a specific country. And that's one reason only, of course, but you just can't provide these services to the people because they are not able to pay for it. You
mean Western medicine is expensive in those countries?
Yeah, the Western medicine is quite expensive. It is here, of course, in our countries, but we're able to pay for it.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, for the ordinary person in the Western world, it's the other way around almost, because, well, with the exception of the United States, in most countries it's paid for on the tax bill.
Exactly.
So we don't see the cost of it. So to us, it's very cheap to go to the ordinary doctor. But if we want the alternative treatment, it's going to cost us maybe, you know, like $50 per session if you want to go to some kind of therapist of some kind.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's exactly the opposite. And if you look at the health budget of Denmark, for example, well, I don't have all the numbers here, but I'm almost sure that I think maybe 15 or 20% of the expenses, overall expenses for health service, is the payment for pharmaceuticals. So it's quite a big amount in the Western countries. But as you said, it's paid. It's in the taxes, and you don't have to pay for it, or sometimes you have, of course. But still, it's easier for us.
So what about research now? Because that's also something that you've dived into, I guess, as a journalist in this area. Not just the practicing of these methods and treatments, but also the research into them as to whether they work or not. What has research shown, and what obstacles do researchers come across when they want to dive into this, and they kind of, you know, have this clash with the traditional, as we now call traditional, which is the Western ordinary.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sorry to say that we have to talk about money again, because it's about the patents. If you invent a pill or a corona vaccine, you invest some money and you have a patent, and so you will have a revenue of what you have spent $millions to make research in this medical product. But you cannot make any patent on treating people with reflexology or acupuncture. It's not possible. So actually, when they want to do this research, they have to start from zero somehow, or they have to have a government who wants to invest in this research. But and this happens, of course, but in some countries it's a very little amount spent on this. So that's the first obstacle, to be able to do this research. And another one, of course, is that in many countries you don't make a career doing this research. And on the contrary, your colleagues in the medical society, they will think that you're a little weird. And so if you want a career, you should do research in Western medicine, or
what everybody else is researching.
Yeah. So it's of course it's a minority, these researchers who are carrying out this research. But in some countries like China, for example, of course you will find a lot of people doing research on acupuncture or other parts of traditional Chinese medicine, and they don't think of this as alternative. It's part of their society. It has been for thousands of years.
But they also don't make any money on that. I mean, they can't take any patents, as you say.
No, of course they can't take any patents, but they just have a different tradition. But of course, I'm familiar with the Western world and the situation in Europe, and of course you have quite a different picture here. And but still, in some countries in Europe, you will be able to go to the university and study homeopathy or acupuncture or other CAM modalities in some countries, and in other countries like Denmark, it wouldn't be possible. People would just laugh and think this is a crazy idea. So
that's the second. You talked beforehand here that there were four main challenges for researchers in this area.
Yeah.
So there are a couple more.
Yeah, there's a couple more. We talked about the funding and the funding is the big one.
Yeah,
I think. And another one is that what we are talking about now, the governments, they don't really recognize this. Again, of course, with differences in different European countries, but it's not most places. It's not really recognized. And the third obstacle is that the international cooperation on this research and development, it's limited. Of course, it is there. You have international organizations of different stakeholders. You have organizations of researchers worldwide and European, but still, some of this again will go back to the money discussion, because to make this cooperation more efficient would also cost a lot of money, just like the research. And yeah, that was three challenges. The fourth one is that the communication between the stakeholders is sometimes random, or at least limited. It could be much better, even though we have these international conferences. It is still limited, and of course, this fourth challenge about communication is the thing I have been dealing with. The first three I mentioned, I will not be able to do anything about this. But what I have been trying to do when it was possible was to improve the communication.
One can understand that it's important for those who want to delve deeper into this and learn more about it, and maybe research, to realize that other people have come to certain conclusions, and there is knowledge out there that if you have that knowledge as a backdrop, then it's much easier for you to realize that you're not alone, and there's some other people who have already started on this. Is that what you're aiming at?
Yeah, and if you go to a conference, an international conference, you will meet some very good researchers. You might have seen them before at another conference, and they are the keynote speakers, and they are very well connected. They know each other. But if you're a young student or a young doctor, for example, you might go to this conference, and maybe you will go 3 or 4 years later, because you cannot afford to go there every year. And the keynote speakers, the very experienced people, they are the ones who arrange the conferences. So they don't have a problem about networking, because they have been networking for a long time. But my idea is that we should do something to enhance the networking also between the new people, because, well, some people retire, and we have to have more PhDs and young researchers into this community. And I don't think it's very easy for them to do this unless they have some lucky to have some funding from the university or in other ways to have support for this effort, because it's not free.
No. There was one project in the European Union some 10 years ago, I think, that you mentioned to me, or you wrote about it in an email. Cambrella, complementary and alternative medicine umbrella, I think it's supposed to be read here. Cambrella, and it was about creating some kind of common ground to define what these methods are, and to kind of, well, just tell us what happened with that, and where did it lead to?
Yeah, by incident, I ran into some researchers in 2008, I think it was, at a meeting in Europe, and then they asked me if I would like to be a journalist, communicator on a project, if they had the funding. And it's a part of the European bureaucracy, so to speak. We have these frame programs. It was called FP7 at that time, and right now I think it's called Horizon Europe, where the European, the Commission, they spent billions of euros supporting different research projects of any kind. And we were lucky, or they were lucky to have this funding, and they started in 2010. And we terminated 3 years later, at the end of 2012. And the task was not really to investigate in which methods were the best for this disease or something like that, but simply what is going on in Europe at all perspectives. For example, what is the legal status in the countries? Is this treatment forbidden, or who are allowed to do it, and etc. And I got some notes here because it's a long time ago, so I have to look at this. But we looked at the needs and attitudes of the citizens in the different countries, and of course we had, I say we, but the researchers tried to get an overview of how many people in each country was using CAM, and we also had a work group. We call this a work package focused on the global perspective, and in some ways most important of these work packages was the roadmap group. It was a roadmap for future CAM research in Europe.
Okay.
And that was actually the main outcome. If you don't dive into the details, the main outcome was some recommendations to the different health authorities in Europe. What should be done to meet the needs of the citizens with respect to complementary medicine? And this was presented, and it was sent out to everybody at the end of the project. And well, not much happened after that.
But, no, because I never heard about it before. And
no, exactly. Yeah. And but the good thing, I used to tell myself and other people, even though it didn't have a great impact, there's a network, or something is remaining from it. There's a network of people in Europe, of the researchers. Some of them have retired in the meantime, but people are still there, and once in a while using each other's expertise. That's my impression, at least.
Well, that's a positive result then.
And of course, the results in details are still available for people who want to know about this, or who wants to start their own research. But I have no knowledge of exactly how people in different countries to what extent they are using this. but I hope they are, because it's still there. It's been a little bit difficult the last I don't think 5 years or something like that, because there was some people in Cambrella who had they had what do you call that, the domain, the website. They were administrating this, and that was fine, but for some reason they decided to give up this domain. So in all the reports you can see the www.cambrella.eu, and now it will lead to some strange commercial website. And that's why you should never give up such a name. So, but still you can find it, but it's more difficult.
Yeah, I managed to find it. I don't know how I did it. I used the right search words, I guess. So yeah, there is a website where you can see what this project was all about. And
it's one of the EU websites. It's still there. But anyway, it was not in vain, I think. But of course, as we talked about in the beginning, it's not. It doesn't have such a high status in the medical community, and because of this, not really in the government health authorities throughout Europe. So it's not a surprise that it didn't have a big impact, I think.
The pivotal change in this area would be, I suppose, or is, when there are studies that can convey results that show that these methods, these therapies really work. And that would be, I mean, that's information and knowledge about what status these therapies have in different countries is important, of course, for those who wanna know what is the situation at play. But I mean, the really crucial and pivotal thing is to see that this really works and to convey and spread that information to the people. So what have you, I think you've written quite a lot about different kinds of studies and reports showing this. Can you give us a few examples of what they have shown to,
Well, first of all, as of course, even though we are talking about this lack of funding, there's been a lot of studies have been carried out in Europe, and quite a lot of them show some interesting things about reflexology or acupuncture, etc. And but most of them are not big studies. They are studies focusing on the patient's experience, reactions to this treatment. And of course, that's not enough when we look at how strict you usually should look at things like that when you do research. But the other thing is that we should not talk about money all the time, of course, because there's a secret which maybe I should reveal that secret now.
Yes, please do.
This secret comes from the theory of science, and it says that when you want to study something, you should use the method which are suitable for exactly this issue you want to investigate. And this secret has been kept very
secret
for years. Yeah. Because if you ask any medical doctor in the health authorities, they say, yeah, but we have to have some randomized controlled trial, placebo controlled, of course, a controlled trial which proves statistically that this treatment is working on headache, for example, period. And that's why they say that if you look at the alternative treatments, you don't have, you only have very, very few studies of this randomized RCT, randomized controlled trials. You don't have really, you don't have some evidence. But if you have some evidence, then we will accept it, and then it's not alternative. Period. And end of discussion, because every politician will listen to the medical doctors. That's a tradition in most countries, because they are the experts, and they will say RCT, amen. Almost like
randomized control trials.
Yeah. And that's the end of discussion.
So how would you conduct a study of some of these alternative methods that is not RCT but would still, in your eyes, be viable and be reliable?
Well, first of all, if I was a researcher, I would look at the problem or the treatment, and I would analyze the process. This person goes to a practitioner. They are talking about different things, and because the practitioner would like to know something about this person, because they have a holistic view of people, and then they would give this massage or put some needles or whatever they're doing, and after this, they will talk to the patient and maybe give some advice. At least this could be some process. Of course, there will be a different kind of processes. But the point is that most alternative therapies, they consist of 3, 4, 5, 7 different factors, and only one of them is the technical fix, so to speak, the needle in the arm, for example. And these researchers, for example, let's take Norway, it's not so far away from us, at NAFCAM, they have a national research center on CAM, and they have employed medical doctors, acupuncturists, psychologists, different fields within the health community, because they want to analyze these treatments from a broad perspective, because otherwise they would not be able to understand what's going on. But back to your question about the method, they are talking about combining observational studies, for example, or comparative studies where they compare two equal groups of people where one gets this treatment and the traditional care, and the other one gets only the traditional care, etc., etc., and maybe a third arm with some placebo involved. And you have such a broad range of methods you can use. So before you decide on the method, you should be absolutely sure that you have mapped, so to speak, the entire treatment situation. And then you make the decision. And you might even do a randomized controlled trial as part of the research, because there's nothing bad about that. But the point is that you have to start with the research question and to analyze the issue before you make this choice of design. But I mean, I'm not an academic, I'm not a doctor, but it's not so difficult to find out that this is not the way to do it if you only use one method, and then tell people that this use of the method in itself is a guarantee for the perfect outcome of the study. And I can quote a philosopher, a Danish philosopher, Adolfsen. He said that if you make the method in itself as the criteria of quality, then it's a question of belief.
Yeah.
And well, exactly, talking about belief, that's exactly what I heard medical doctors say about alternative treatments, that it's a question of belief. It's almost religious. And but they're
yes,
doing
but the other way around is also true. It is almost religious if you, as you say, think that you always need to use RCT in order to have a result at all. But let's. You mentioned the placebo effect, and I think it's very central to this whole discussion. And there has been some recent studies. There are some recent studies that really confirm that this is a real thing and it's very strong. And I think there is, even in the mainstream, some kind of movement towards the idea that maybe there is something to this. It's not just what it has been seen as traditionally in Western medicine, namely an annoyance, a nuisance almost, like kind of a noise in a study. But actually it's dismissed because of that. But I think it's grossly underrated in the mainstream, because the mere fact that so many get well just by believing that they're getting an active substance of some kind, I mean, it tells us something about the power of the non-physical aspects of us, doesn't it? And it ties in with so many of these alternative treatments. I mean, it is an alternative treatment that the mainstream is using without knowing it, in a way.
Yeah. And I'm happy also, as you said, that there's been a growing interest on studying the placebo. What is it? What is going on? Because even a lot of doctors, they are beginning to, as you said, to say that this is not only noise, it's more than that. And doctors, even if they don't believe in complementary medicine, they agree that the attitudes of the patient and this psychological factor is very important in any treatment, even an operation. And but still, it's the placebo control in these studies are still considered as very important, and you have to exclude the placebo factor because otherwise it will not. You will not have valid studies. But also, we have been seeing research in the psychosomatic mechanisms for years. So everybody seems to know that there's a link between the psyche, as they call it, and the body and the physical part. As you said, if you give people this pill or whatever it is and tell them that it works, it would be great if we could take this serious. But someone would not be very happy, because it might be more difficult to sell different pills.
Yes, definitely.
And make
I mean,
money.
We eat too many pills as it is. So yeah, that would be a good thing.
And we have a doctor, not a medical doctor, but a psychologist who made her doctoral thesis some years ago in Denmark about the placebo. And she had been diving into some studies, and they were very well performed, but sometimes she was studying the placebo group and the real test group, and finding out that a lot of them, they knew they had the placebo. So this double blinding was not working. So that made it even more complicated for the researchers if they have to consider that the placebo group, they know that they had nothing.
But what's happened with that group? Did they still get better, or?
I don't remember the study, but it was a surprise to me, because for some reason I happened to go to her defense of this thesis. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah, I know there was quite a big, I think, study at Harvard not many years ago that showed that this is, I mean, it's huge when it comes to painkillers, for instance, because pain is something that is very, very subjective, and that's almost acknowledged now by the mainstream, that it is kind of psychosomatic. You can feel pain without really having any physical reason behind it. So I think it's the placebo effect in some cases is up to 60%. So, which means that it's actually more effective to believe that you are experiencing less pain than it is to take the actual pill, which means that the pill is meaningless. If it goes above 50%, the pill is pointless, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a problem for these companies that produce these medications.
There's another interesting point when you have these studies. If we don't talk about the placebo, but you have some medicine and you study this the trial, and you find out that it is working on 80% of the population. That's not bad. And then you might get this medicine recognized, and it will be used at a greater scale. But nobody is interested in the 20%. Why didn't it work on those people? And because the main difference, maybe it's the main difference somehow between the Western medicine and the complementary medicine is that the medical doctors, they will tell you that everybody is in principle made of the same stuff, and they are like the same. If this pill is working on your headache, it should also work on my headache, because we are physical, we are the same machine, so to speak. And on the contrary, if you go to China or Ayurveda or whatever, they would say, what kind of person is having this headache? Instead of just asking,
what kind of car is this that needs repairing?
Yeah, something like that. And so that's the reason, of course, that nobody cares about the 20% who didn't have an outcome of this medicine. And that's a pity. And it's also a pity I can't help talking about a vaccine. For example, the HPV vaccine. In my country, we had some terrible incidents of young women getting very sick after this vaccine. And after some documentary, it was investigated, and the authorities told us that it was not really true. There was no problems with this vaccine. And of course, the girls and their parents and everybody else was very angry, because they had no doubt that this happened. And also, the authorities scientists had made some in studies, and they told us that there was only so few side effects on the HPV, and I believe them too. I think both parties are right, because nobody ever considered that this could work differently on different women, because that's not an option. Either it works or it doesn't work. Either you have side effects or you don't have. And that's because you have this, in my viewpoint, stupid view that everybody is the same. So if you open up and start making a different kind of diagnose and a different kind of analyzing, different ways of analyzing these studies, I think it would be different. But of course, we have to ask a researcher about that, because I have no clue how to do this. But it seems that it's a big problem.
It is, as you say. I think we can all see that in Western medicine, whereas so-called alternative, what is called alternative practitioners, they see the individual. Each patient that comes is an individual, and it starts all over. Every time a new patient enters the door, so to speak, it's a new discussion.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned before when you talked about this, the grand scheme of things, the structural problems here, the money funding problem, and that Western researchers and Western health practitioners, doctors, they laugh at these alternative therapies because they don't believe in them, and maybe that's also some kind of effect of the fact that they know that wouldn't make any money, but so subconsciously they might think that, and then that's why they laugh at them. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe they don't believe. But my point here is, or what I want to come to, my question is that this should not apply to journalism, to the media, one would think, because I mean it would be extremely interesting, of course, for the media to write about alternative practices, alternative treatments that seem to work and that are very interesting. Because I mean that shouldn't be in the financial interest of the media not to write about that or to laugh at that. No. But you have a different experience. Tell us.
Well, it's not really an interesting issue for the media. Unless, of course, you have, if you have in the magazines, in the most popular magazines, if you have this person who was almost dying, and then he or she met an alternative practitioner, and now she is running a marathon. Whoa, a miracle! And it doesn't tell you anything because it's an anecdote. It's not a trial. And on the other hand, you have in the mainstream media, we had a campaign, I would call it, some years ago before the corona, with articles in the big newspapers of this person going to consulting an alternative practitioner and talking about her cancer. And for some reason, the treatment didn't work, and maybe the woman would not go to the doctor instead, or to the hospital, and this might be on advice from this practitioner, and now she is dead. And tons of stories like this.
Yeah, I mean, you can just remember, of course, the story about Steve Jobs and what he did and did not. He died from pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And that was also, I mean, these stories are always highlighted by the mainstream as a cautionary tale.
Yeah. So then somehow they get this story at the newspaper, and they call some medical doctor. For some reason, they are calling the same doctors most times, and they will tell you that this is so dangerous, this alternative stuff, and nobody knows exactly what this practitioner has been telling the woman or what has happened. But after all, it's your own decision if you go to this practitioner or if you go to the hospital. But anyway, nobody really knows the essence of the story. But if you tell the doctors or the press that now we have 10 cases of people who have some benefit from this acupuncture or any treatment, the doctors would say, yes, it is anecdotal evidence. And it is, of course. You cannot judge anything from 10 successes. But our Minister of Health in Denmark, some years ago, he was stating that now we have to do something because people should not use dangerous alternative treatments, because he has read it in the newspaper.
Yes, talk about
anecdotal.
Yes,
and no protest, no nothing, because the journalists, they didn't interview anyone with just a little bit of common sense.
It's an extreme bias. Is it that journalists are afraid to be on the wrong side, so to speak, on the wrong team, to be ridiculed themselves? Are they afraid of that?
I've been asking myself this for years. I really don't know. When I talk to someone, including journalists, most people, they don't have a clue about what's going on. And I think it's a, what do you call it, peripheral issue to most journalists. And if they somehow run into a story, they want to have a source. That's the way you and I are brought up. We have to have a good source when we write, and they call the medical doctor, because medical doctors, they are experts, period. And if it is a controversial thing about, let's say, a woman with a sick child, or maybe some HPV issue, and she's very worried, and she is working and has a job, an office job somewhere, and she is being interviewed about her statements and her worries about this, and she is very critical to this treatment or whatever it is. And then the journalists think we have to have a second opinion, and then they call a professor. And I think you can guess which of those is the heavy source in this article.
Yeah.
Just mainstream, some woman who has a problem, or a medical professor. They don't never get the idea of interviewing another academic who doesn't agree with the professor, because then they would be even, so to speak. But I don't know why people are so ignorant in the Danish media, because if you talk about climate, if you talk about most things from the normal things, to speak, everybody will have a second opinion, and of course they know that these two people will have to be somehow at the same level in the academic world. But I think journalists, they have tend to have this belief in authorities, which has been, in my view, been confirmed during the Corona period.
Yeah, we'll get back to the Corona thing a little bit, I think, in a while here, because I want to ask about that also. But from my experience, I would say that mainstream journalism is, broadly speaking, part of the same structure as the government and the education system and this whole overlay that we have, the structure of societal structure. So it's very difficult to get out of it. They're all dancing the same dance, so to speak, but they have different roles in that dance. But to get concrete here, I think when we're talking about the fear of being ridiculed or being on the wrong team, or in this context, I would say, I don't know if you agree, but I would say that homeopathy is probably the alternative treatment that is ridiculed the most in most Western countries. Maybe not in Germany, as you mentioned, maybe not in a couple of other countries, but in Western Europe and in Sweden, definitely, you would be ridiculed if you said that homeopathy works.
Yeah.
So that's really a tough one for a mainstream journalist to dare to write an article that is positive towards homeopathy. I think that journalist wouldn't stay at his or her job for very long, because this is really controversial. But what do you think is at play here? It's diluting a substance to the point where there is actually really not even a few atoms left of the substance, and it's still considered to be a medicine that works. What is at play here? What could this be?
What could this be? Yeah, I agree that it's the same in Denmark. I have to say that the attitude towards homeopathy, if you're a medical student and your teacher wants to tell you that something is at stake at the lesson at the university, this is crazy, he would not say it's crazy, he'd say it's homeopathy. Yes. And everybody will laugh.
Yeah.
And if you don't laugh, the other people will look at you, so you better laugh. You better laugh. And they would say, yeah, let's have some homeopathy. Yeah. Cheers. Well, I think that I met a researcher some years ago from Switzerland, and he was telling me that he knew about homeopathy. He was telling me that actually no scientist to date has been mapping the properties of water 100%. Actually, we don't know everything about what water is and how it will behave, so to speak. And that's one thing. And the other thing, of course, is that when you have this belief that only what we can measure with our instruments, physical, this is the only thing that exists in this world, then in itself, it's a way, it's a reason for excluding homeopathy, because there is not any molecules left, of course. And also, when you have this dissolved 100,000 times, and then you should shake it afterwards, it is also part, and it makes it even more mumbo jumbo. Why should you shake it? You're crazy. And of course, I don't have the explanation. I think it sounds crazy too, but there must be a reason it still works, because you cannot fool 100 millions of people for years. So,
well, I guess the Western professors would say that they are fooling hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, it's placebo, of course. They would say, yeah.
Would say that.
So and it makes it also difficult to make these studies. But still, there's a brave professor at the University of Copenhagen these days who are carrying out a trial on homeopathy.
Very interesting.
And he, in the beginning, before Christmas, I think there was a media storm. This is crazy. And the journalists, I could see, they called all the usual suspects, all those scientists in Denmark and in other countries who they knew were opposed to alternative medicine. I can recognize the names every time because it's so easy to get a comment from one of these guys. So they didn't bother to ask the questions to some other people this time. They could have done that. People who have a much more reflections on the issue. It's also possible to find some scientists. But anyway, so but now it's easy. Everybody's only talking about Russia. So now he is able to carry out his research, and he doesn't want to be interviewed. Not at the moment, at least.
Okay, let's see how that goes. One of the few good things about this war that's going on then. So the question is, how will this be able to improve? How can we make the mainstream science and health system open the door to these alternative treatments? You have mentioned something you call the wall, and to get behind that wall would be a paradigm shift. What would it take to achieve that kind of paradigm shift?
Oh, yeah.
Big question.
It's a big question, yeah. The wall in Berlin was the easy part compared to this, I think. But of course, some of this wall consists of the economic issue of the money, of course. But let's not talk about that. The paradigm shift, the mindset of the physical world is the only thing that exists. Period. But what about these people having such benefit from taking the blue pill instead of the red one, as you said, the placebo? This is not part of the physical world. So that's just one example, but this worldview of that the physical world is the only thing that exists, it's not consistent. It's there's a lot of holes in the wall. But still, if you ask this question to at least most people in the scientific world, they wouldn't dare to say anything else that the physical paradigm is the right one, and there's nothing outside. And and nobody had really a near-death experience. They were just having hallucinations, for example, even though we have so many thousands of cases confirmed in different ways, so everybody can see that it's not a hallucination, for example. And so there's a lot of holes in this wall, but most people, they tend to say that the holes are not there, even though you can see them. So I really don't know how to get over this challenge. If I did know, then I would probably have a prize. I don't know.
So it's going to the paradigm shift is not solely about changing the health system and healthcare principles, but it's about changing our whole world view, really, and our whole view of what a human being is.
Yeah, and I've not been reading a lot of books like about science. I have, of course, but Thomas Kuhn, who was talking about the paradigm shift, I remember that he was saying that it doesn't depend on how much evidence you place in front of a professor saying that this is real. The non-physical world is there because we can prove it. And you can have tons of evidence. It's not enough. It's a question of reaching this critical mass of people and events, and not only evidence, but a critical mass, or even that some researchers die and the younger ones are different. I don't know. So, but of course, you shouldn't stop doing research because of this. And I know that a lot of people are doing that all the time. But they have some issue, they have some problems getting their research into the scientific journals. There's a lot of gatekeepers there. And yeah, I know we should talk about that on a later occasion, but
yeah, we can do that again. Of course, we can talk more about this. But as we have mentioned in many episodes on this podcast and everywhere else, the fact that we are able to communicate easier now across borders and connecting millions and millions of people by way of these modern communication technologies, I think people are more and more realizing that they're not alone in thinking in these ways that you and I are talking about now. So that's a hopeful sign, perhaps, a hopeful development.
Yeah, that's a good thing about
that might speed up this change if it is coming. Just to wrap up here, or whatever the word is, I said that I wanted to ask a little bit about COVID also. Maybe it's not the best thing to wrap up with, but anyway, to connect it to this wall that you were speaking about here, would you say that this wall, this paradigm wall, was prominent also during the COVID pandemic? In that case, in what ways?
Well, I don't think it was exactly this kind of wall we ran into during COVID.
It's more psychological, maybe?
Yeah, it was a psychological phenomenon, and also a wall in the media among the journalists. Maybe a wall of fear, or I hope it wasn't a wall of ignorance, because journalists do not tend to be stupid. On the contrary, there's a lot of people who are more experienced than I am, and experienced with digging into very big cases, and being paid very well for doing that. So of course, it's not a lack of intelligent people, but some kind of wall has been there and still is, because they don't mention some issues, and they don't interview sources who are in opposition to the government. And it seems like a mystery, but there might be some very simple explanations. I just didn't find them yet.
No, but it's very salient, as you say, that the media has been very loyal to the government in respective country, I think.
Yeah, it's worth a lot of money. The government has spent 170 million Danish crowns on PR related to the corona.
Mm.
And if they also should have paid for this effort, should have paid the media, it would be, I don't know, double up, I don't know, but a lot of money too. So somehow it has been cheap for them. But of course, this is considered as service, public service to the citizens, of course. They don't consider it as public relation, I know.
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot of things to say about the vaccine and all that, but shouldn't dive too deeply into it, although it's been obvious that this was a very digital situation. You mentioned this before also, that the thinking is that if this works after this randomized trial that we made, then it's going to work for everybody. So now we roll out it to everybody.
Yeah.
Roll it out. So that has been the thinking broadly.
Yeah.
Okay, Jesper Madsen, thank you again for joining the show and shedding some light on issues around our health and some issues that are really misunderstood.
Yeah, thank you. And talking about paradigm shift, a lot of things are going on, and now we are in Mind the Shift. So
Yeah.
That's also a good thing, of a good way to make holes in the wall.
In the wall. Let's make some holes in the wall by way of shifting our minds on Mind the Shifts. Let's say that the name of this podcast is a good omen. Thank you, Jesper.
Thank you. Cheers.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. And you can follow Mind the Shift on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow me, Anders Bolling, on all the main social media and also on medium.com. Thank you.